It's time for your Low Country Real Estate Market Update. It's the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Brian is one of the top 1% real estate agents in Charleston. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-345-1273. Now, broadcasting from the WTMA studios, here's your host, Brian Beatty.
Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. 8 years I've been on this program giving you my opinion of the real estate market as somebody that has sold real estate here locally for 16 years, over 1,000 properties sold, about $1 billion worth of real estate represented, top 1% of agents here for the past 12 years. So I share my experiences with you. I help you understand what's happening in the market from a boots on the ground perspective, not just what's happening here locally, but regionally, nationally. How does that affect us here in the Low Country so that when you, a listener of this program, are considering buying, selling, or investing in real estate, you have a pulse on the market, you understand what's going on, you know the right questions to ask, and I think, a good job on the show of separating the hype and the fiction from the facts. I want you to be an informed consumer. I do not want you to rely on information that I believe to be misguided. And quite frankly, there's a lot of it out there right now. And so one of the questions that I'm going to answer today, and one of the topics that I feel is most prevalent in the discussions that we're having with folks on a day-to-day basis is, are we in a bubble? Is this bubble about to burst? I think that's one of the biggest questions in the market right now is that, are we in a bubble right now? So I'm going to share some information with you on that. I'm going to talk about some national numbers, some national stats, help you guys understand what's happening across the country, and then relate that to what's happening here in Charleston as we've had, this great reshuffling of society and our population into some different pockets of the country, Charleston being one of them. I mean, you guys know that. You look around when you're driving around, look at the license plates of folks on 17 or 26 or 526. You'll see that there are a lot of folks without South Carolina tags driving around. Now, just the traffic in general should help you guys understand how many folks are moving to the area. I wish I had stats on how many people were moving here daily. I think we'll probably get that sometime next year as it relates to this year. We're just kind of right in the middle of it right now. But it's certainly, my guess would be more than the 43 people that we were adding to the population as of about 2 years ago, which, if I recall correctly, was 32 new people being added to Charleston a day and then 11 new births a day. So, I want to talk about this issue first of, are we in a bubble? I want to look at it from a few different perspectives. We'll talk about the local real estate market, and we'll talk about practical application of this information toward the tail end of the program. But we've got a lot of information to get through. Before I get into this, if you would like to reach out to me, if you have some questions about the market, if you're concerned about purchasing a home in this market, if you feel as though the market might be starting to level off and you want to take advantage of the remaining momentum in the market and try and sell your home for top dollar, give me a call. Let's have a discussion about that. Let's see if the timing is right. Let's see if your goals are something that we feel we can accomplish and that the market will bear. We'll talk about the process. We'll talk about our guarantees, our experience, and how we can help. So my direct number, 843-400-8009. That's my cell phone, 843-400-8009. That will go to me directly. You can check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. You can look at, all of our, you can learn more about our team, search the MLS, find out what your home is worth. You can even look up to see how many buyers we actually have in our system for your home right now. So a lot of great tools, and of course, 8 years worth of content on a weekly basis under the radio show tab. A lot of great information there. So either the website, listingsincharleston.com, or you can check us out on Facebook, YouTube, all that great stuff, Spotify. So let's kind of get into this. Let's talk about what's going on in the market right now, because I think a lot of people are kind of in the position right now where they've seen the rapid appreciation. They've seen that there's hardly anything available for sale, which has lasted for years, by the way. And they're starting to get clued into the fact that interest rates are going to be on the rise. I think people are becoming more and more aware of the impact of the massive amount of money that our country has printed and what that might do to inflation, what it will do to inflation. It's not a might, it's a will. It's just a matter of when. And then how does that impact the market? You know, that there's unsurety in the market right now, and that leads to nervousness. And what I would offer first is just a quote, which the quote is that when you have a void of information, emotions tend to drive decision-making. And we could probably spend 20, 30, a day on that quote. But I would offer that in the market right now, we're seeing people that maybe are a little misinformed, both on the agent side of things and, of course, on the consumer side of things. Maybe they just don't have a great handle on what's going on, and they're making decisions emotionally, or they're thinking things are going to happen based on their emotions. And one of those questions is, of course, are we in a housing bubble right now? Again, they're seeing prices increase drastically. So when we started off the year over year in January and February, we saw 10% appreciation. This is nationally. And then if you look at the appreciation that kind of continued over the course of the next several months, it just kind of compounded and piled on top of that. So I do think it's a valid question as people see this appreciation, and the question they have is, how much is too much? What's the breaking point here? Is it 20%? Is it 25% appreciation in the market? And by the way, when somebody says, hey, are we in a housing bubble? Really, to me, I kind of reframe that question to myself to say what they're really trying to find out, which is my home going to lose value? Who wants to buy a house today and then tomorrow it's worth less, and then less and less and less and less? So I think it's a question we have to be able to, of course, answer in today's real estate market. So I've got some information in front of me. Obviously, you guys can't see this because you can only hear me, but I will put this into a blog post on my website, listingsincharleston.com, so you can see some of the data that I'm going to pull from. And I think the first thing that I want to talk about here is, when it comes to a housing bubble, the first thing we want to start to look at is, what are the loans that are being made to people right now? Are risky loans still in the market like they were back in the housing crash? And don't make the mistake that just because, the idea of I can walk into a bank and I can tell them how much money I make and not have to prove anything, because, back in the day, 14, 15 years ago, you could just say how much money you made. You had no income or stated income, stated asset, no documentation loans. So we had all these folks that had the ability to borrow money and be okay with paying a higher interest rate because of the risk associated with that loan. But how does that compare to right now? Well, if you look at some of the graphics, you'll see that back in 2006, $376 billion in mortgage originations were for people with credit scores below 620. Last year, it was just $74 billion. So what we know today is that there are the folks that are buying homes are qualified. They have better credit. They're just it's a very different landscape than one of the factors that led to the housing crisis back in 2008. And coming out of Harvard's most recent State of the Nation's housing report address, they say this. They say these outsized increases have raised concerns that a home price bubble is emerging. However, conditions today are quite different than in the early 2000s, particularly in terms of credit availability. The current climb in prices instead reflects strong demand amid tight supplies, helped a little bit by record low interest rates. So, even the 30-year fixed rate right now is still, 3-ish%. We knew that last year we hit a really low, or I guess a new low. We hit it 16 different times, by the way. So when we look at the landscape or the financial wherewithal of the people that are getting mortgages right now, it is better than it was in 2005 and 2006, 7, and 8. So we've got really just a much different set of circumstances. If you look at, I want to take you kind of next is to the Fed's report on the household debt service ratio for mortgages as a percent of disposable personal income. I'm going to say that again for you. The Fed put out a report on household debt service ratio for mortgages as a percent of disposable personal income. Now, disposable personal income is just the money you have left over after you've paid your taxes. That's your money. And what you would be able to see if you go on my website and look at this graphic is that at the height of the housing crisis, the mortgage or the household debt service ratio was a little over 7%. Where we stand today is just under 3.5%. So we're in a much better position, even if we go all the way back to the 80s. If you go online, you'll be able to see that visually. Now, do we have a problem with people being over-leveraged and taking on a ton of debt like what happened back in the housing crisis? No, not really. We're in a very different situation. And being able to see these visuals will help with your understanding of that. But I think the maybe more important question is, what's happening with affordability? Are people paying too much? Are they buying more than they can afford? How is that impacting them financially as staying in a home just becomes more important? A lot of folks are working from home now as opposed to commuting to an office. The space that you live in over the past 2 years has just become much more important. So we're going to focus on affordability. We're going to talk about prices. We're going to talk about inventory, demand, all that great stuff. We're going to take a quick break. Stick around for more of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. And remember, if you want more information on this information that I'm going to share with you this morning on the state of the market nationally, regionally, locally, visit listingsincharleston.com, or you can always just give me a call, 843-400-8009. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Visit Brian Beatty's website at listingsincharleston.com. The Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues next on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA. 1250 WTMA. Expert news and views on the Lowcountry real estate scene. The Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on 1250 WTMA.
Welcome back, Charleston, as the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. We're talking this morning about the state of the market nationally. I have had a lot of people ask recently, are we in a bubble? Things don't feel right. They kind of feel like last time. Should I be concerned? What should I be doing to prepare myself? So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what's happening in the market nationally, regionally. I'm going to tie that in with what's happening here locally. As somebody that has sold real estate here for 16 years and has been in the top 1% of agents for 12 consistent years, just to give you guys an understanding of what I'm seeing on my end. Should you be concerned? Should you be able, with information like this, to separate the hype and the folks that, I realize the irony in this. I know I say that a lot, but, if you go on YouTube and you try and figure out what's going on in the real estate market, everybody is after engagement. Everybody wants you to like and subscribe to their content. You have no way of doing that on a radio show, so I don't have to push that to you, which is why you're going to see things like, graphics of tidal waves with houses on the top of the wave saying that there's a massive tidal wave of foreclosures headed our way, and to be prepared in that this is going to be worse than last time. And there's so many differing opinions on where our market is headed right now that I wanted to take today and just kind of break things down a little more granularly. I hope you guys understand what's happening in different segments of the market so that we can collectively piece together what we think is going to happen. I am happy to share my thoughts as to what I believe is going to happen, but I'll tell you, folks, it's the data that you read and that you have access to. It's challenging to find correct, wholesome, non-political data about real estate. I mean, shoot, just about anything these days. And And some of the data that you're going to see, like as an example, the forbearances that everybody was talking about, we went from, I want to say we had about 6 million people in some form of forbearance as of about a little over a year ago. They were saying that 30% of all mortgages were going to go into a forbearance program, and that all of those would lead to foreclosures. Well, now we're seeing that 8.5% of mortgages actually went into forbearance, and as of right now, it's actually down to 3.5%. So instead of it being 30, it ended up being 8.5%, and then it's slowly been declining. Now it's 3.5% of all mortgages, which is close to about 2 million mortgages. So obviously that's some great progress, but the question is, where are they getting that data? And these are the things that I want to challenge you to challenge sources on. Because if a loan, as an example, is, let's say that you've got a loan with Bank of America, and they're servicing that mortgage. Your statements come from Bank of America every month. And then you go into forbearance. And then you notice, 2 months later that instead of it being Bank of America, now it's Chase, or it's some other entity that has now begun servicing your loan. Well, that's because they sold your loan. Now, whenever these banks or these what we call GSEs have forbearances, they are a reporting agency. They have to report that forbearance. But if it were to sell, as an example, to a private equity firm or to Wall Street, those entities do not have to report those deficiencies, those delinquencies, those forbearances. Which is why when you're looking at the picture of what's happening in this nation with things like forbearance, you're only getting half of the picture because these banks have already sold off their bad debt. Now, I say bad debt, they're potentially compromised debt. Folks that are in forbearance. So yeah, it might say that we have a little under 2 million folks in forbearance, but those are from the entities that are required to report that kind of information. If those mortgages have already been sold, if that paper's already been sold, then we're not going to find out what those numbers actually are. So in reality, the numbers that you're seeing or reading or that are being reported are actually about half of what's going on, maybe even a third of what's going on, and it's the good half, right? So I want you guys to be, understanding of the fact that there are holes in the data, and it's a very political climate right now. Just as an example, not even so much with the data, but think about all the folks that are moving here. Like as an example from California, not every single person that lives in California is a raging liberal. A lot of folks are just tired of living in that environment, so they're moving to the East Coast. So you've got this great reshuffling of people kind of across the country, which we've talked about. But I want to get back on track, and I want to talk more about affordability. Because, we kind of know what's going on with loans based on our previous segment, but a lot of folks they don't necessarily care about the climate, so to speak, of the type of loans that are being given out. They should be, but I think what they're more concerned about is affordability and how that's going to play out. There's a quote from Mark Fleming over at First American, and here's what he says. He says, looking back at the bubble years, house prices exceeded house buying power in 2006 nationally. But today, house buying power is nearly twice as high as the median sales price nationally. Many find it hard to believe, but housing is actually undervalued in most markets, and the gap between house buying power and sales prices indicates there's room for further house price growth in the months to come. So I always bring up affordability. And with affordability, there's two topics. There's affordable housing and there's affordability of that housing. Affordable housing is, generally, entry-level homes or lower ends of the market across the country. Whereas, of course, affordability is, how much home can we afford in relation to the dollar and in relation to our wage. And so if you look at affordability, it has been trending downward at a somewhat accelerated rate over the past several months, really over the past several years. Understanding, of course, that affordability is made up of three major components: interest rates, sales prices, and wages. Well, what are they saying is happening or going to happen with interest rates? They're going to go up. What's going to happen, at least in the near future, with prices? They're going to go up. Are wages increasing at the same rate by which properties, it costs you to own a home? Because it's not fair to say, hey, are wages going up at the same rate of appreciation as home values in my area? Because that's only half of it. The other half of it is the interest rate that somebody's going to pay in order to afford that home. So that's why we look at affordability. It's a much more clear picture of, the affordability of real estate. And I think when you look at things like that, and then try to ask the question, hey, are we in a housing bubble? You're going to have some folks that say, absolutely not. It's just a supply and demand issue. The main driver of the housing shortfall has been the fact that builders have just not been able to keep pace. I mean, there's a graph that I'll put up on my website that looks at the 50-year average for number of homes built every year. And if you look at it, what you'll find is that, and this goes all the way back to the 70s, is that for the past 13 years, we have not, as a nation, kept pace with the 50-year average. There were literally more homes built in this country in the 70s and 80s than there have been in the last 10 years. And that is part of the reason why we have the issues we have. It's because there just aren't enough homes in relation to the number of buyers that want to transact. Then, of course, we have things like a pandemic. Then we've got rising prices for materials and labor and delays. And all the while, the cost of the land to build on goes up. So, as we kind of look forward to the rest of the year, we're going to bring you to, we're going to bring this information to you. We're going to forecast. We're going to help you understand what's happening behind the scenes, kind of at a macro view, and then we're going to get more granular as it relates to how is this applying to us here in Charleston? I mean, it's great to understand what's happening nationally, because obviously we as a local market are going to be subject to what happens regionally, to what happens nationally, to what happens with all these folks that are in forbearance, where, and again, you have to be careful because they're going to say things like, hey, if you look at what happened with all the folks that were in forbearance, about 40% of them made their payments. Because if you're unfamiliar, the way forbearance works is they're going to say, hey, we're going to put you into a forbearance program. You do not have to make any mortgage payments for the next 6 months. But at the end of 6 months, you got to pay them all at once, one time. And if you don't, then they create some sort of workout with you, some modification with you. Maybe they'll take those missed payments and they will, let's say you've had a loan for 5 years and you just can't come up with, let's say a year worth of payments up front. You just don't have the cash. So then they're going to say, all right, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we just take your mortgage? Let's basically refinance it. Let's modify it. And we will amortize the loan over a 40-year period, and we'll just tack that amount onto your mortgage balance. So you kind of start over, but with a lower or more manageable payment. When in reality, that's a really bad deal. It's if you want to keep your home, it's really your only option other than selling it, assuming you have equity. But if you think about it, look at your mortgage statement. If you bought a home in the last few years, the majority of the payments you make initially goes toward interest. So all they have done is re-roll the interest clock, and now you're paying more and more of it. You haven't gained much ground over that period of time, and now you're going to kind of hit the reset button. And if prices do go down, which at some point they have to, there's natural cycle of the market. You're not digging into the principal balance of your mortgage. So if you have to go and the value or the principal balance of your mortgage is going to stay very close to the original balance for the first few years, and the market could look extremely different in 2 years from now, in 3 years from now than it does right now. But I'm going to leave you with this analogy as it relates to, what's happening right now, because I do think we're seeing a slowdown. We're seeing people that, and I talked about this in one of our last shows, where people are just tired. They're a little fed up with constantly having to get into a bidding war in order to buy something, and having to pay what they feel is a ridiculous price just to get a house. And of course, from a seller's perspective, that's great because you want them to get emotional over the process. And and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, how we can kind of use the emotions within the market to our benefit, whether you're a buyer or a seller. But if you've been traveling down the highway and you've been going 90 miles an hour, flow of traffic for 50 miles, you're going to get used to traveling at that speed. But let's say a cop merges onto the highway and now you've got to back it down to 70 or 75 or whatever it is. You're going to feel like you're crawling at a snail's pace, when in reality, you're just doing the speed limit. So it's important to note that we, as a kind of population, we tend to get used to and take for granted what happens for long periods of time. We're all used to, at this point, a very seller-driven market. And so when we start to see these shifts or slowdowns and a decrease in the rate by which properties are appreciating, people start freaking out. They're like, wait a minute, something's going on. A return to normalcy is not a bad thing. It's a healthy thing. You just need to understand how to benefit from the shifts in the market. And of course, you need to work with an agent that understands the shifts in the market and how to position yourself to benefit as greatly as possible. So if that's something that I can help you with, because when we come back, we're going to talk about the local market. I'm going to leave it there for the national side of things. I could get really deep into that. I just don't have time for it today. Maybe in another show. But if you want to reach out to me and you want to talk about the market, you want to talk about your positioning within it, whether it's buying, selling, investing, you just like some general knowledge, we'd love the opportunity to help and just chat. So feel free to reach out to me, call or text. My cell phone number is 843-400-8009. That's 843-400-8009. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. And of course, you can always just send an email, brian@brianbeattyteam.com. Stick around, folks, for more of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com.
Hear the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show every Saturday morning at 9 and each Sunday morning at 10 on 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com.
1250 WTMA, the Big Talker.
Now, here's more of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA.
Welcome back, folks, as the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. If you're just joining us, we were just talking about what's happening nationally in the real estate market. Are we in a bubble? Are we about to burst? In the short term, I think the answer is no. I think we still have some momentum left in this market. I am concerned that the data that's being shared by some websites and by some folks that are deemed to be reliable by the general population are only getting half of the story. And as a result of that, I think that it's shaping, I think it's maybe sometimes causing a little more confusion than gaining clarity in terms of what's happening in the real estate market. It is a complicated landscape to navigate. I can say that. I was fortunate in that in 2006 when I got licensed, I understood as somebody fresh out of college that in order for me to be successful in this business and to truly be valuable to my clients, I needed to understand what was going on in the market. I needed to be a resource for them. I needed to be a value add rather than just somebody that facilitated a transaction. And then by the time 2008 rolled around and the market crashed, I was positioned for that. I understood what I needed to do to help people. And by 2009, I was in the top 1% of agents in the market as a 24, 25-year-old. And I've been there ever since, helping people make the best decisions possible given the dynamics of the real estate market, so that when it comes time for them to buy, sell, or invest, they win. That's what this show is about, is arming you with that information. So I just want to, just take a moment and say thank you to those of you that listen to this program. I've been on here 8 years. I love coming on here and telling you guys kind of like it is about the real estate market. I don't necessarily have to worry about pulling punches, but this is really just, I've been doing this for 16 years, and I'm at the point in my career where there's not much that I do to beat around the bush with people. I'm not one to gloss over things. I want you guys having a really good understanding of the process of the market, have reasonable expectations, and then work with somebody that's going to work their tail off to create results for you. So I'd just like to say thank you for listening to the program. Now, we're going to talk about what is happening locally. We just talked about what's going on nationally. We know that in addition to kind of what I mentioned, the White House has recently announced some additional measures to help struggling homeowners and to help them avoid foreclosure as they kind of exit forbearance, which initially we had several million people in. And, a little over 40% of them actually paid what they were supposed to pay and worked it out. About a little under 20% did not have an exit strategy or an exit plan after the forbearance was due. And so you've got, a little over 50-ish percent, about 50-ish percent of people that are in some sort of workout solution, a loan modification. And we know that based on kind of last time, people that go into a loan modification, 65% of them fail. They result in a foreclosure or short sale. So we know that the White House is, trying to help with this forbearance exit strategy, including things like loan modifications, payment reductions. Any borrower with a federally backed mortgage can lock in lower interest rates. They can extend the length of their mortgage. For the folks that just can't kind of get back on track and resume their monthly mortgage, HUD will offer lenders the ability to provide all eligible borrowers with a 25% principal and interest reduction. So there's just, and don't get me wrong, I like that there are some options for folks should they really, truly need it. Of course, the concern is that anytime we have an injection of money, that we're going to pay for it at some point in the future. And I know they're just trying to do the lesser of two evils. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't know. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of just spending our way out of this problem. And I think there are plenty of you that are listening that would absolutely agree with me on that. But even with all, everything that's happening right now, inventory is still an issue, has been for years and years and years. If we look at the amount of properties that we've put on the market in Charleston, year to date, compared to this time last year, we've put about 600 more homes on the market compared to, and this is for the end of July. We don't have August numbers yet, obviously, but new listings, new properties to hit the market is up 4%. So we put about 600 more homes on the market. If we look at properties that are going under contract, at the end of July, we put a little over 15,000 homes under contract. This time last year, it was a little over 13,000. So that's up 14%. The number that have sold, we've sold a little over 14,000. Whereas in 2020, at the end of July, we'd sold 11,600. So that's up 23%. 23% more transactions at higher prices, by the way. So what's been interesting to watch is that over the past, several years, kind of dating back to, I want to say like 2016, 2017, the days on market, it was about 2 months on average in the Tri-County area. It's been kind of trending downward a little bit as we kind of crossed that 2018 threshold. There was a little spike in there, and then obviously we had a little spike with COVID. But then it seems like things started to fall off a cliff. Now we're at, July of last month, 14 days, average days on market compared to 51 in July of 2020. So that's down 73%. And then we look at the median sales price. You're going to hear different numbers on different things, and it's important you understand, all right, are we talking median here? Are we talking average? Which is more important? Which should we use? Personally, I like using the median because of the variety of property that we sell in Charleston. You've got first-time home buyer properties, you've got trailers in the outskirts of the Tri-County, and you've got $10 million homes in downtown Charleston and on the beach. So if you're going to remove the outliers, then let's use the median sales price, which is up 17% from this time last year. The median sales price in Charleston is $340. This time last year, it was $290. But if you want to look at the average, if you really want to go for the dramatic factor, then the average sales price is up 24%. Average sales price in the Charleston Tri-County area is $481,069. This time last year, it was $388,207. So that's up 24%. That's why we've got all these folks that have started calling us. They're kind of shocked at how much they think their home is worth, because we're having a lot of folks that are just reaching out to us and they're like, I wonder what my home is worth. I don't necessarily want to sell it right now, but it just might make sense. Maybe it does make sense to go ahead and sell this home. Like a lot of folks that we've been selling homes with have decided to downsize just a little sooner than they intended. Man, I'd love to just get top dollar for this place, transition into something else, secure at a low mortgage before things potentially go crazy with all this inflation that's going to be impacting us at some point in the future. They see things like 24, 25%, and their heads turn, and they're like, all right, well, let's at least investigate this. And that's what we've been helping a lot of folks do, is let's just have a conversation about where you are right now, where we think things are going to go, and does it make sense to do something right now? Should we wait? If there's no pressure, there's no pressure. It gives you the ability to make a sound decision rather than kind of a reactionary decision based on emotion. And that's what we always try to do, is we try to bring the facts into the equation, not operate off of emotion. Then if we start to look at things like the Housing Affordability Index, which we talked about last segment, nationally, it's, in January, it was around 180, and by May, it was in the mid 150s. Here in Charleston, let me just get to that slide. Yep, in July of 2021, it was at 80. This time last year, it was at 92, so that's down 13%. And just so you guys understand, again, the Housing Affordability Index takes three things into account. Home prices, interest rates, and wages. So the index really measures affordability for a region. For example, an index of 80 means that the median household income is 80% of what is necessary to qualify for the median priced home under prevailing interest rates. A higher number means more affordability. The lower the number is, the more it becomes a problem. So we're under 100% now. So with a affordability index locally of 80, that means 80% of median household income is 80% of what is necessary to qualify for the median priced home under prevailing interest rates. So that's, people are getting priced out of the market. Is our price increases locally sustainable? Well, maybe not for us that live here locally, that haven't seen those wage increases to keep up with those price increases. But think about all the people that are moving here from other markets that have more expensive real estate. They've got money to spend. They can work remotely, and they can take advantage of our homes and their affordability, as opposed to being in New York or Chicago or LA or wherever. But there's a lot of those folks moving to this area, and they're not batting an eye at paying more than what a property is worth, because in the grand scheme of things, it's less than what they were paying for something not as nice as what we have here. And that's the challenge for folks that live here locally is, if you're going to get into a bidding war with one of those folks and they have, maybe they are less stressed about paying more than what somebody is asking, because no buyer out there really wants to pay more than what someone's asking for something. I don't care if it's a pen or a house. No one likes to pay more than what somebody has established as their asking price for something. And that's really what I want to talk about in kind of this last segment, which we're going to go to in just a second before I finish the remainder of these stats is, as a buyer, as a seller, what do we do right now? How do we navigate this? What should the train of thought be? When is too much? At what point do we just say no? What point do we stop? I want to leave you with the month supply of inventory, which the month supply of inventory is the inventory of homes for sale at the end of a given month divided by the average monthly pending sales for the last 12 months. As of right now, we have 1 month supply of inventory. This time last year, we had 2.7 months. We have had less than 2 months supply of inventory since November of last year. In fact, in April, May, and June, we were under a month. Meaning, if we didn't put anything else on the market, we'd be sold out in a month. If you look back at, 2009, between the first and second quarter of 2009, we had like 17 months supply of inventory. That's a buyer's market. A normal market is around 5. So obviously still very much so a seller's market. So are we in a bubble? Is this thing about to burst? People tend to think that, hey, if we're about to burst, then if we're not in a boom, then we're in a bust. What I would tell you is that we are starting to see some signs that we are returning to normalcy because of the exhaustion that people have mentally and emotionally, and the financial exhaustion associated with rising prices and decreased affordability. It's just naturally going to happen. So stick around. We're going to talk about how we navigate this when we come back. Keep listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. And if you want to reach out to me, give me a call, 843-400-8009. That's 843-400-8009. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com.
More stimulating talk on real estate matters with Brian Beatty. Next on 1250 WTMA.
1250 WTMA.
You're listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com.
Welcome back, folks, to the last few minutes of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. So with only about 2 minutes left, I want to give you guys some really quick takeaways from today's data. If you're a buyer and you're in this market right now, it's really important that you have a conversation with somebody, preferably a real estate agent, of course, and hopefully us, but that you have a conversation about what you are absolutely unwilling to do in order to get into a new home. Maybe that's a total amount of payment on a monthly basis. Maybe it's a certain level of inconvenience. But at some point in time, you have to establish a stopping point, a bar by which you do not go above that. It's the same thing if you're an investor. If you're after a specific return on investment, then we can establish that baseline. Here's how much you have to buy it for, given all the other factors, in order to achieve that return on investment. We don't go above that number. Now, I know that's really hard to do from an emotional standpoint as a buyer, but my caution to you would be to have that conversation up front so the emotions of the transaction don't take over, and then you have buyer's remorse. As a seller, the easiest thing I can tell you right now is that it's time to be really careful about your price. Being a little greedy as a seller is okay because in most instances the market will support it, but you also have to understand how much is too much for a home and how most buyers aren't going to be willing to make such a ridiculous offer on a property that it just doesn't make sense. So have that conversation too of, hey, if we're going to try this strategy and we're really going to push the envelope and try and get this much money for our house, let's try it. Let's go for it. I've seen people make very silly decisions, in my opinion, in terms of how much they purchase property for. But after a certain period of time, we should have information that tells us it's just not going to work and let's come up with a plan B. If I can help you guys in any way, feel free to reach out to me, 843-400-8009. That's 843-400-8009, or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. Unfortunately, I'm out of time, but you guys enjoy your weekend, And thanks again for listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Contact Brian Beatty online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-400-8009. That's 843-400-8009.